Welcome aboard, sailors!
Again, we're going to start off this lesson with some vocab. So we only have 3 today. So you're going to use your Cornell notes again, and on the left-hand side, you're going to write characterization, protagonist, and trait. And for characterization, on the right-hand side, you're going to put the definition as the creation or construction of a fictional character. For protagonist, it is the main character of a story. And for trait, it's a distinguishing quality or characteristic, a detail about a person.
Go ahead and pause the video now and make sure you take these down. All right, welcome back, sailor. So today we're going to talk a lot about characterization again. You've seen this slide before, but we're going to go through it again really quick because remember, characterization is how we get to know characters in a story. So when we're talking about characterization, you need to think about what motivates characters to act in a certain way, what characters tell us about themselves, how the character treats other people and how other people treat the main character, and certainly what we learn about a character through their dialogue and dialect, like slang. All right? So what we're going to do today is do a deep dive on a character in The Outsiders. We're going to examine the characterization of one character of your choosing.
And in order to do that, you've got options. There's 2 different ways you can do this. The first way is that you can choose a character from The Outsiders. Choose a character that we know pretty well, that's been discussed a little bit, and there's a good amount of information on. And you're going to draw a picture of what they look like according to the novel. That means you're going to look at information about what other people said they look like, maybe what Ponyboy describes them as, maybe some comments that other characters have made about them that talk about how they look. And then you're going to surround your illustration with other evidence about their character. So this is quotes from other people, what they say about them, and even some important quotes from that character themselves, some memorable things they've said. Here is some examples of that.
So notice what's really important is it's not just the picture, although the picture is very important to the descriptions of these characters, but it also includes specific actions that they took, quotes from the text to support what they did, their thoughts and things they say. So we need specific details to go with the drawing, not just a drawing. Now option B, if you're not so artistically inclined, like I know I wouldn't have been if I was asked to do this assignment, you can just choose a character from The Outsiders. And using our ACE, which is Answer Cite Explain format, explain who that character is, including how they look, think, and interact with the world around them, including evidence from the text. So things like, what do others say about them? What are some important quotes from this character? And make sure that you are using evidence to support your answers. This is a model that you could use to answer these questions if you're not really sure where to start with that ACE format. So pick a character, and their name will go anywhere it says character. So if you said Ponyboy, the question would be, how does Ponyboy solve their problems here? Maybe you want to do Soda Pop or so on and so forth. But pick the character, and anywhere it says character, that's just where their name goes. And you can tell me like how that character solves their problems, and also what they think about their life, their position in life or the way that they're living, and if they're happy with that, frustrated with it. And as always, evidence from the text with a page number where it says source and an explanation that explains your evidence.
Now, in the last lesson, we did talk about dialogue, and we don't want you to be confused thinking that these right here mean that you have to find a piece of dialogue. This is us quoting anything in the book, whether it's something someone said, something Ponyboy thought, just a description of what's going on. We're going to put these for that too. So this does not have to be dialogue evidence. It can be any piece of evidence from anywhere in the novel.
Dialogue or otherwise. So dialogue is usable, but it doesn't have to be dialogue. Again, when we're quoting texts in our writing, we also use quotation marks, 2 uses for the same idea. So go ahead and pause the video now, pick option A or B, and complete that option in your notebook. This should take you a little while, but once you're done, come on back to this video, and we're going to introduce you to your anchor assignment. Get to work, sailor! All right, welcome back, sailor. Now, we're going to get to our first anchor assignment, our first big game day. Now remember, when it comes to our anchor assignments, this is where we're actually grading your skills. So what we are introducing to you right now is an assignment that is actually going on the gradebook, and it is actually a part of your grade. So notice, this is not in your reader, writer notebook like usual. The assignment will be posted in Google Classroom where it must be completed and it must be turned in. Otherwise, we don't know that you're done with it if you don't press that turn in button. So with that said, let's get into it.
So we're going to look at pieces of this assignment one at a time. When you get it in your Google Classroom, it's going to be one long document. But right now we're going to look at one piece at a time. And what we're doing is we're brainstorming our original hero. So remember, you are not talking about an existing hero, somebody that's already been written about or already had a movie about them or existed in real life somewhere. You're making somebody up. And so we're going to use this graphic to answer these questions to start to build that person. So the first thing we're going to say is, what motivates your hero and why do they act heroically? And this could be things like, some kind of tragic backstory. Maybe something bad happened to them and they want to make sure that bad thing doesn't happen to other people in the future. Or maybe something is happening to someone they care about and they have to take an action. This is your hero optimistic or pessimistic? Optimistic meaning they look on the bright side of life and everything's going to be okay. And pessimistic means that they are expecting things to go bad and preparing for it. Does your hero have many friends? That's kind of obvious and could be kind of sad. What makes your hero laugh? Where does your hero live? Where are they from? What other details about your hero's personality haven't been explored in the questions above? This is not optional. You will come up with something for this.
So keep in mind, what is your hero's personality? Now don't go start that. Make sure you finish all the instructions because we have some important information as we continue. Next are some really just basic details about your hero. Now that we've thought about their personality and you've kind of got some basic traits down, what's your hero's name? How old are they? Do they have any nicknames? What makes your hero special? What makes them them? And building on that idea further, what are their physical traits? This is where we're going to get really particular. These are all fairly straightforward, so I'm not going to read them one at a time, but this is where we're going to really get into the nuts and bolts of the imagery of your character. So make sure that you have strong images, like we practice writing, in these passages to show us specifically what your character looks like. If these are weak answers with no descriptive language, you probably won't score great on this anchor assignment. Remember, you've got to give us strong images in this section. Now, as we head into our next section, we have mentioned before that you are writing a research narrative. And we're giving you 3 options of things that you can research. You could research the plot, the setting, or your characters in the story. And we're going to give you some ideas on how you could do that research.
So the first thing we could research is plot. And that might sound a little crazy. How could I possibly research plot, right? So a lot of times people that are writing stories, they place their story in an actual historical event or time that's close to an event, and this is called historical fiction. So you could pick an important historical event and follow its events closely. And then your fictional character that you made up, that's never actually existed before, interact with the real events that actually happened. That's called historical fiction. You could also research events, historical battles, famous protests, tragedies, or alternate history.
So as long as your plot is really informed by research that you've done about a historical event, that could be plot research. So as a couple of examples, maybe you make up a totally fictional protagonist that takes part in famous protests during the civil rights era for whatever movement in that era they would like to take part in. Maybe you are going to have a soldier who's in an ancient Roman battlefield like you're learning about in history class, and that could help you out with your research. Whatever you would like to do, if you want to do plot research, you just have to have specific events that inform the story that your character exists in. Now your next option could be setting. And when you're researching setting, you want to think about a place that you don't necessarily know a lot about, although that doesn't necessarily mean you can't know. You can have advanced knowledge of something just so long as you can research it further to go in detail. So you could research a specific cultural background of characters in the setting so that you could really have your characters embody that culture as part of the research for your narrative. There could be a specific city that fascinates you, or even if you want to get more specific, there could be a neighborhood in a city that you really find particularly interesting for whatever reason. There could be a historical city, an ancient civilization, or perhaps even just a different time, and you could research decades like the 50s or the 80s if you want to have a Stranger Things-esque story. Or you could even go all the way back to other centuries like the 1500s or the 1700s. What we're looking for here is not to constrain your options, but you want to pick a setting that you can do research into the background of, and we need to be able to see that research reflected in your story.
And finally, you could research your character itself. So this means you could research some life events of your characters, looking like okay, what are somebody who was in the civil rights era and they went and protested? What does that look like? How do you plan a protest? How would somebody go about that? How is my character going to rally people together? And so go and pull that from how other people were able to do that. You could look at character traits. So if you, again, with the protests, what does that take? What kind of person does that? Is it a shy person? Is it somebody who's really outspoken? And then what motivated people that have gone through similar events as your character? How would their behavior, their character, how they looked, how would you pull from historical people that went through similar things as your character to kind of develop that for your character? But please don't forget that your character has to be original. It cannot actually be a historical character. It just can be inspired by.
We're going to emphasize that. Your character must be original. It cannot be a historical or existing fictional character. We cannot emphasize this enough. The assignment is to create an original character. It's imperative, it's so important that you create a character. So you're not writing a story that features like Martin Luther King Jr. as your protagonist. That would be unacceptable. That's an actual historical figure. He can't be your main character. Now, he could be in your story as another person that your character interacts with if you want to go that route, but your protagonist, your main character, has to be your own. So with that said, I want to emphasize, you're going to pick one of these. You don't have to do all three. That sounds like a lot of research we just talked about, but you're just going to pick one. So if you research plot, your setting and your character will be totally original. You'll come up with all of that. If you research your setting, your plot and your character will be totally original. You'll come up with all of it. And if you research your character, your setting, and your plot should be totally original. You can come up with all of it. Or at the very least, you don't have to do research to support it. With that said, we'll need you to now go ahead and fill out the research section of your brainstorm. So pick one of the following elements: setting, plot, or characters. Which of these are going to be the area that you research to support your story, and start to think about what research you will need to establish your narrative setting, plot, or characters. Where are you going to find that information? Post at least 3 different websites you are going to use to perform this research and inform your writing.
And then using what you know about imagery, write a description of your hero below. This is not a list of traits. This is just like how Ponyboy describes himself in The Outsiders and describes his brothers in detail and takes time and compares them to other things, and we can really picture what's going on and get an idea of what these characters look like. You're going to do that exact thing, but for your character.
This puts us in a position where you should be using a lot of those physical traits that we talked about above. So look at all those physical traits that you included, and you can use that to write some really strong imagery. As one final note, we need to make it clear. If your character, plot, or setting is pulled directly from an existing story, and when we say existing story, we mean existing movie, existing book, anime, web series, we don't care where it came from. If any of these is pulled directly from an existing story, that is plagiarism. Get to work, sailor.